This week is beginning like the last one ended with another shakeup at the White House. This time it's the new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, who is now the old communications director. He is out just 10 days after his appointment was announced. Scaramucci was fired today, reportedly by the new chief of staff, General John Kelly, on his first day on the job. That happened just hours after President Trump tweeted that there is, quote, no chaos at the White House. To review, it was on July 21st that White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer resigned after Scaramucci was named communications director. Scaramucci immediately butted heads with then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Last Friday, the president replaced Priebus with General Kelly, who's been Secretary of Homeland Security. Chip Reid is at the White House. Chip, no chaos.
No chaos, but I tell you, there's something close to chaos that's been going on at this White House for quite some time now. Now, General Kelly, a four-star Marine Corps general, has been brought in here in large part to try to get rid of that chaos, and it looks like his first step in doing that is to get rid of Anthony Scaramucci, the brand new communications director, because you'll recall that profanity-laced screed last week that he launched at then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and at Chief Strategist Steve Bannon was anything but military discipline, and military discipline is what he plans to bring to bear around this place. Now, there are still some people who believe that President Trump is only going to change so much. And remember, there were reports after Anthony Scaramucci's tirade last week that President Trump liked it, even with its profanity. So we'll have to see if this is just one step and President Trump then goes back to the way things have been, or are they really going to clean this place up and get rid of these 3 or 4 different power centers that are at constant warfare with each other? Is he really going to be able to install military discipline in this White House? Anthony?
Chip, do we know, is Mr. Scaramucci out of the White House entirely or just out of the communications director's
job? We are
job?
trying to find that out. The last I saw on my device was that they are about to put out a statement. But we don't know yet exactly what's going to happen. But certainly he is not going to be one of the main people talking to President Trump and talking to the press if General Kelly has anything to do with it.
Well, we're looking at General Kelly right now at a White House event for Medal of Honor winners. Again, his first day on the job, and it's already been an eventful one with the ouster of Anthony Scaramucci, the White House communications director, after just 10 days. Mr. Scaramucci's tenure was very brief, Chip, just 10 days, but it had a significant impact because it resulted in the departures of both Reince Priebus, the former chief of staff, and the former White House press secretary, Sean Spicer.
That's right. Sean Spicer left because Scaramucci was brought in, and Reince Priebus left apparently because of this battle. But at this point, that's just been wiped off the board, and it's hard to believe that General Kelly would bring in anybody other than a respected communications director, perhaps someone he worked with at the Department of Homeland Security or somebody he knows from military circles who will help him install military discipline on this often chaotic White House. Anthony?
Chip, do we have any indication what sort of conditions General Kelly accepted the job of Chief of Staff on? Because there were a lot of questions. I mean, Mr. Scaramucci, when he was appointed, was reported to the president. He didn't report to the Chief of Staff, which was one of the issues of contention with the outgoing Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus.
That's right. I think what is happening today is our first big clue on the conditions that he demanded here, because it was very much up in the air as to whether he would be able to impose discipline, get his way, get his own people in there, get rid of people he thinks were not acting with the kind of discipline that he thinks is required in important jobs like senior advisors at the White House. So this is really our first clue, but we're still waiting for other shoes to drop here to see if he's going to follow through on this and perhaps get rid of other people who are at constant warfare, or maybe shuttle them off to different parts at the White House so that the people reporting directly to him are marching together as they do in the Marine Corps.
I want to read the statement that the White House just put out. Here it is. Anthony Scaramucci will be leaving his role as White House Communications Director. Mr. Scaramucci felt it was best to give Chief of Staff John Kelly a clean slate and the ability to build his own team. We wish him all the best, which would seem to indicate there is not another job for him at the White House. It's also interesting wording because that's pretty much what Reince Priebus said when he left last week. So, well, again, the president tweeting that there is no White House chaos, but another day of turmoil in the White House as the White House Communications Director, just 10 days after taking the job, a very loud 10 days, is leaving. And we do not as yet know who will be replacing him, but clearly an opening shot from the new Chief of Staff, General John Kelly. There will be more about this on your local news on this CBS station, on our 24-hour streaming news service, CBSN, and, of course, right here tonight on the CBS Evening News. Till then, I'm Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.